Is the ego the source of our thoughts, or are our thoughts generated elsewhere and pass through the ego?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. There is no ego apart from the thoughts. The thoughts, identification with thoughts is ego. But the thoughts that go through your mind, of course, are linked to the collective mind of the culture you live in, humanity as a whole. So they are not your thoughts as such, but you pick them up from the collective, most of them. And so you identify with thinking, and the identification with thinking becomes ego, which means simply that you believe in every thought that arises, and you derive your sense of who you are from what your mind is telling you of who you are. Opinions, viewpoints of that's me. That's some people talk to themselves and say, you are so good. Why doesn't the world recognize you? Or the mind says, you're no good. Same thing. You're no good at all. You fail at everything, don't you? Again, and then you believe in it. And then you suddenly have a low view of yourself. Why you have a low view? Because you believed in your thoughts. And why are you thinking those thoughts? Probably you picked them up somewhere, maybe in childhood. Maybe your mom was so stressed out that you said you're no good. And so you pick up certain thoughts and they get stuck in your head. Thoughts that you hear in childhood, they're little energy forms, like entities, and they get stuck in your head and don't refuse to go. They go. And the more you believe in it, the more more deeply lodged they become in your mind. And so some people are stuck with very hostile entities. I'm saying entity, not in some spooky way, but every thought is an energy form, and as such we could call it an entity. And there are many people in this world who are stuck with hostile, life-denying, continuously critical and attacking entities that they carry in their head, and they believe that is who they are. And they are continuously attacking themselves. And if they are not attacking themselves, they attack others around them. Let me tell you who you are. Of course, what they're really saying is, let me tell you who I am. So they project the famous saying, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. Which means you look at reality through the screen of your thinking and your judgment, which is conditioned by the past. A dreadful prison to live in. It's like blinkers, worse than blinkers. It's like looking at reality through heavy veils. Ooh, looks so dark here. Is that a human being or? So the identification with thinking, believing in your thoughts, having no space outside of the movement of thought. Again, here we come to the vital thing, lack of space inside. That is the unconscious condition, spiritually, completely unconscious. And then you are burdened with a heavy ego. You are the ego, which is not an entity apart from thought. It is thoughts that you have identified with. And the first moment of freedom comes when you realize that certain thoughts have been going through your head for years, perhaps, and that they are only thoughts, and that you are not the thought, you're the awareness. In my case, I became aware that I had a thought, for example, that started in childhood, one of many negative thoughts I had. Bad things always happen to me. Bad things always happen to me. And that was, when I saw people around me, okay, they have got all these nice things, and always there would be bad things happening. And of course, your perception then becomes selective. When you have a thought like that, you notice much more, because in everybody's life, in daily life, things go wrong. You miss a bus, you get stuck in a traffic jam, or you lose some money. But yes, this is normal. But if you have the thought, bad things always happen to me, you're extremely aware of those things, and they confirm to you that the thought is correct. And this is the selective perception of reality through the screen of thinking. So the reality will confirm to you, and not only that, that thought or any thought of that kind actually attracts bad things, negative things. Or if you believe people are basically bad, and that's a deep-seated belief, and you don't realize it's only a thought in your head or a belief, not only would you single out where you observe unethical or bad behavior in others, you would, there it is. Not only that, you actually are much more likely to encounter people who manifest that kind of behavior because you attract it. And so that's just incredible how people create their world through that. So freedom comes from stepping out, encountering, first of all, a little bit of space inside you, presence. And then from there you realize certain thoughts as repetitive and just a thought. Bad things always happen to me. Oh, there it goes again. I thought that before. So that's to become free of ego means becoming free of thought, identification with thought. That's the end of the ego. It may reassert itself from time to time, but at least that's the awakening. What about your thoughts? Habitual thoughts, do you?
Probably that I have to get everything right. There's an intense, figure it out and get it right. It rules me.
And if it's not right?
I escape. I just won't do it. I pretty much predict ahead of time, so I won't try a lot of times.
Yes. Yes. Some people are afraid of not succeeding in whatever they do because they have their self-image, which is derived from thinking, would suffer. If I fail at something, then my self-image will be injured, and therefore I'm not even going to try. And again, that's to do with deriving your identity from thinking. And even the thought, I have failed, is a lie. I am a failure is an even greater lie. You have not failed, you can simply reinterpret and say, I have learned something here. This is not for me, for example. So, but why believe the lies that your mind produces? So, as you know, many people live with a very hostile mind. But those people their motivation would probably be very great, I would hope, to get out of their minds. But first they need to realize that their problems are self-generated, mind-generated, not world-generated. nobody is evil, but they manifest extreme unconsciousness, which we can call in many cases evil. Do people start becoming nicer as you become more aware, or is it just that you no longer get consumed by the anger that arises when in the company of not so nice people? Well, I would say both. When you become more aware, you're not reactive anymore towards people. You don't personalize things anymore, make everything personal, and are always looking out for some kind of hidden insult, or looking at what's his real intention behind what he's saying, what does he really want. There's an openness and a non-judgmental attitude towards others that non-reactive relationships then generate already more consciousness in the other, because unconsciousness strength is two unconscious people to strengthen each other's unconsciousness. So if somebody says or does something that may be unconscious and I don't react to it, it does not become amplified through my reaction. If somebody says or does something unconscious and I react to it, condemn it, even if it's just in my mind, I actually amplify it, and I myself become part of that unconsciousness through my judgment. If I can be non-reactive, I can allow other humans their behavior, because that's their present stage of consciousness. They behave as they have to behave at this moment. So I allow them to behave, to do what they do, I accept it, and then suddenly there is a different energy there. And so I don't amplify that, and those people then, I don't condemn them, I don't equate their unconscious behavior with who they are. That's why it's so important not to judge others. It doesn't mean you kind of go through life saying, oh, everything is fine, that you don't see unconscious behavior. You see what they do, you know what they do, but you don't equate that with who they are. You know it is an overlay on, it is human unconsciousness. They're expressing that. It's not who they are in their essence. If you confuse the unconscious behavior with who they are in their essence, then that's called judgment. If you see that somebody's doing something extremely unconscious, that's not judgment, because you don't equate it with who that person is. And so on. You don't say, he is evil. That statement would be wrong of anybody, because in essence, nobody is evil, but they manifest extreme unconsciousness, which we can call in many cases evil. So that's important then, not to strengthen that and to get trapped in illusion. Because when we believe in our own judgments, it's not only we trap others in the judgments, we ourselves get trapped in the judgments. Also, people become nicer, which is true, what the questioner says. People become nicer when you are present and aware, because they can feel the absence of judgment in you. Even if they don't, they may not be able to tell you, but I can feel the absence of judgment. They only feel it as a certain goodwill flowing out from you towards them, or an acceptance flowing out from you towards them. And humans can feel that. Even unconscious humans, they can feel that. And everybody is grateful for that. Underneath all their madness, they feel grateful because somehow in that acceptance, in that goodwill that kind of flows out in that space, through that space of acceptance, they feel a little bit more themselves than they usually are. So, and when a human feels a little bit more at ease in themselves when they come to you, they like you and they are very nice to you. They don't know why. And their usual ego patterns, not all of them are operating anymore. Some may still come up, of course. So the ego is less, the ego doesn't feel threatened. It feels, oh, there's no need to be that defensive here. The ego feels it can kind of relax a little bit. Of course, it's still there in the background, where it just like a dog. But it's not in its usual state, like the Rottweiler. So it just, okay, can relax a little now. And then they like you, so you become a nice person to them. That's perhaps all they know. When they ask him, oh, he's such a nice guy. Like to see him, like to go to him, and such a nice, okay. So yes, you do experience that. So partly simply because presence, acceptance is there and is recognized, and partly because there's the absence of reaction when somebody suddenly blames you, for example, says, you left that door open, you shouldn't. And say, oh, I did? Yeah. The usual ego thing, of course, is to say, no, I didn't. Whether you did or not, because it's regarded as as the ego feels diminished when somebody blames you. You did that. No, I didn't do that. You did. And it starts from there and then escalates. Why do you always blame me? Look what you did yesterday. That's called reaction, defensiveness. And that's not there. So then there's just, you're stating the facts. You left that door open again. No, I didn't. And then there's no further arguing. There's, yes, you did. Well, maybe, if that's what you believe. Or you say, yes, you're right, I did that again, sorry. You don't feel diminished when you were wrong. The ego feels diminished. Just to admit that you've been wrong is a dreadful thing. So the ego can't do that. It's like a little death. To say that you've been wrong is a little, and if somebody proves to you that you've been wrong, it's even worse. And then some people will start hitting you. Right? That's how the ego can, an ego can easily do. If it's so obvious that you've been wrong and somebody proves it, then you start hitting them. That's a big argument. And if you knock him out, the ego still wins. Yes, there is a general improvement in relationships, of course, with presence.
So many of you are being called upon to teach. In the Course in Miracles it says that the moment you start living it, you become, they call it a teacher of God. That's fine if you don't make it into conceptual identity. It's always the danger. So if I tell you, from now on you are a teacher of God, the ego goes, oh, I have a new identity. I'm a teacher of God. Of course, that only works if others are not a teacher of God, because if everybody is a teacher of God, then the identity collapses. So, I don't necessarily recommend that you think of yourself as a teacher of God, but you will notice that situations that you go into, your state of consciousness affects the situation. Your state of consciousness affects the people you are with. And that's one level of teaching. Even if you don't say anything, your state of consciousness does affect your surroundings. It also affects others that you never meet, because at a deeper level, all of human consciousness is a totality, is connected. And then there's another level of teaching where you actually, people come to you and ask questions. And many of you are already in that position, perhaps because you're already practicing, you're already working with people in whatever capacity, as body workers, as counselors, as teachers, whatever it may be. So many of you are already spiritual teachers, formally or informally, and some of you will become formal spiritual teachers if you're not already. And if you're a formal spiritual teacher already, it's fine. You're just here to enjoy yourself, and that's great. So, knowing that the most important function in your life is to embody this consciousness, and whatever your life situation is, you bring it there. You don't need to think, I need to change my life situation in order to be able to be present. If that is the case, be present wherever you are, even if what you're doing now you may not like that much, or think it's not important enough, or you would rather be doing something else. Give your fullest attention to what the little things that you're doing, rather than waiting for something really significant to happen in your life. The big thing, as the expression goes, I'm waiting for the big break. I'm waiting for it. It's going to come. Many people live like that. It may come or it may not come. It doesn't make any difference. The big break is another mental concept that doesn't have that much meaning. The big break, I've had the big break. What does it mean? It means every moment is still very simple. I sit somewhere, I speak, I walk from here to there. There's just still the simplicity of every moment. I sit, I speak, I stand, I talk, I lie down, I breathe, I eat. This moment there's nothing big. If I go to give a talk to 2,000 or 3,000 people, there's to step into the car, I sit, I look around the streets being driven. There's only just the simplicity of this moment. There's not a big thing. That would be a mental concept in the head. And then I then I sit in the green room waiting. It's still 20 minutes to go, but it's fine. That's only the present moment. Breathing, being nobody in particular, not developing the mental concept, I'm going to do this big talk. No, just this moment. Big talk is a mental concept. And then you step onto the stage, one step at a time. Don't think, no thinking, no thought, just one step, another step. Oh, there are all these people. Oh, you look. Oh. And then you sit down, and there's still no thought in your head. And then a thought comes. There's nothing big about it, unless the mind creates a narrative about it and says, this is huge. It's a huge thing. And it requires vigilance, because it can be a challenge, these things. The world can be challenging. Some years ago when I did the big thing with Oprah, again, everybody would have said, wow, you're doing that, and now you arrive in Chicago, and they pick you up, and then you're in a town, then you go to the opera studios, and the whole world is tuning in. They're sitting on these monitors, all these people, and so it's this huge event on the internet, the webinar with Oprah, amazing. And this requires real vigilance so that you don't leave the present moment. Just stay with the present moment. Otherwise you build up a huge mental structure that will make you uneasy. And you start to believe in these things. The power is only there if you can stay centered in the now. In particularly in those situations, stay centered in the now. And then just little moments. And there comes Oprah, and you give her a hug in the now. Okay, it's fine. And she's so good at, she does it so naturally after many years of connecting with the camera and people through the camera. We sit there, and there's 1 minute to go, and she's still talking to me about this and that. And that's 20 seconds to go, and she's still talking to me about. And just 5 seconds before, she looks into the camera, and then she just talks. That's and again, that's a good example of something that comes. It takes her over too. There's a presence that comes the moment she connects with the camera or the people. Something acts through her, something speaks through her, and that's the power that she discovered when some of you may know the story. She might have told it on the webinar, and some of you remember that webinar from years ago that we did. But it's a meaningful story. It's a simple story, but meaningful. How she discovered her own power. She was in her early 20s, and she was a newsreader at a TV station in a southern Oklahoma or somewhere like that. And her great aim in life, her ambition was to become like Barbara Walters, who is or was a famous TV personality in the United States, very famous, Barbara Walters. So in her early 20s, I want to be a Barbara Walters, I want to become like her. I want to be as famous as her. So that was her great ambition. And one day she was reading the news and she was reading, of course, when you read it on the prompter, and she misread one word. So she had this wonderful persona built up as the newsreader, and the image was Barbara Walters. I'm Barbara Walters. And she read, and she mispronounced one word. She stumbled. The word was Canada, and she pronounced it Canada. And that stopped her in her track, and she said, on the camera, she said, "Did I just say Canada?" I meant Canada. And she noticed something at that moment, and there was a power suddenly there that wasn't there before, because the role had collapsed. Her ego was playing a role. The role she was playing unconsciously had collapsed because she made that mistake and then admitted she made a mistake, and she could feel it felt so much better not to be playing a role. So when the role was disrupted, that was the first time she connected with, this is my interpretation, she didn't add that to the story, that was the first time when she connected to the power within her, which was beyond ego. So the role had to collapse. And then she changed. She gave up the idea of wanting to be Barbara Walters, and she could just be herself. And by being herself, of course, there's nothing wrong with Barbara Walters, but she has had a far greater effect on humans than Barbara Walters. I think even Barbara Walters would agree with that. And so by being herself, the deeper self, she discovered the power in this little moment of disruption of her role. So it's important, again, I've written about roles a few times in various places and spoken about roles. To play roles is part of the conditioning of your mind, the conditioning of the ego, and you have to be vigilant to catch yourself when you find that you are playing a role, when you talk to people. How do you communicate with people? Self-observation is important. Self-observation. How do you talk differently to one person to another person? How do you talk to the Pope, if you ever met the Pope or the Dalai Lama? And how do you talk to the man who is sweeping the road? If there's a difference between the way in which you talk to the road sweeper and the Dalai Lama, or whoever, then you're playing roles. So, and you can only know that through vigilance and self-observation. Can you just be yourself? And again, to be yourself, what does that mean? It means to be your deeper self, not the conditioned self. Be yourself in any situation, be connected with that, and come from no thought, so that while you interact with another human being, there's that spaciousness in you. While you listen to another human being, to listen through the spaciousness within you. And then the words come out of the spaciousness directly. And then the wonderful thing happens, you talk to the Dalai Lama in exactly the same way as you talk to the road sweeper. That means you're free of roles, and that's a wonderful discovery. In the old consciousness, the predominant state is one of waiting for the next thing. And in the new consciousness, even when you're waiting somewhere, you're not really waiting. You're just being where you are. And you can use every opportunity when there is an external waiting. You're waiting at the airline counter, for a bus, at the traffic light, at the supermarket, to meet somebody, you have an appointment, waiting for somebody to arrive. So much waiting. I read somewhere that the average person who starts driving at the age of 20 and drives a car every day throughout their lives, how they worked it out, I don't know. They spend, I believe, it was 4 or 5 days of their life waiting at a red light. If you sum it, add it all up, it's 4 or 5 days that of your life you spend waiting at the red traffic light. And most people are not happy when unless it's just one instance of waiting, and so many other occasions when you are waiting, and mostly people are not comfortable with waiting. They get restless, uneasy, complain. They shouldn't be waiting. Well, maybe not, but you are waiting. Things should be different if people only were more efficient and punctual and did their job properly and were aware of the time, but they're not. So whenever you're waiting, see if your state of consciousness can be one of being present. Enjoy being where you are. Start with the supermarket. And if you notice the shift from the restlessness and discontent and complaining, the anger, even irritation with having to wait at the supermarket, and then say, okay, is that a pleasant state? Do I really want, is it possible to be here in a different way? Do I choose to be in that unpleasant state? Am I forced to be in that unpleasant state? Is somebody forcing me to be irritated? No, I'm just irritated. I can't help it. Well, that's just a thought. That may not be true. I can't help it. And then you realize that you can help it, and you simply drop your irritation and come into the present moment. Irritation is just a thought. This should not be happening. Or I'd rather be out of here than in here. But you're in here. And this is just a tiny thing, of course, but as we mentioned before, life is made up of tiny things. And if one tiny irritation is followed by another tiny irritation somewhere else, and followed by another tiny irritation somewhere else, and every tiny irritation leaves behind something and energy, and that gradually it builds up. And then you get more prone to irritation, and not just irritation, then add up 100 little irritations, and then you become a potentially angry person who was waiting for the next thing to be angry about. Hopefully can find something to be angry about. So can just drop it. You drop it by realizing it's futile. You're actually creating it yourself. It serves no purpose. There's an underlying assumption, and this is a childlike way of looking at the world, or a childish way of looking at the world, an immature childish word that says, if I get really irritated, things are going to change. In the same way a child might think, if I cry hard enough, something will happen. And of course, in the case of the child, often it is the case, and then the parents come running. But if you're an adult and you cry hard enough, not necessarily cry as such, but metaphorically speaking, are unhappy, you believe the same thing is going to happen, but it's not. In fact, people run away from you. They don't come and say, oh, you have that energy of, get away from me. Yeah. So it's practice with those little things, so you can not only be free of irritation, you can also actually use those opportunities to be present. Then you welcome every time you're waiting. And if you don't succeed, that's okay occasionally, but you welcome every time you go, oh. One very small anecdote happened to me recently. I was at a supermarket waiting, and the cashier was the slowest that I've ever seen, perhaps in my entire life. And not only did she not know what she was doing, she also engaged every customer in a long conversation. And even I, who is usually okay with these things, could feel a small amount of irritation creeping up, and then immediately I let it out and it went away, and then another one came. But by the time I finally reached her, the irritation fortunately was gone, and I was present again. And when she saw me, she said, oh, I've been waiting to meet you all my life. And I was so glad that the irritation wasn't there anymore. And she said also that she hadn't been there for very long, not worked there for a long time yet, so she's still learning. And she had recently moved back to Canada after spending 10 years in Maui, Hawaii, where time is not so important, of course. People have a loose relationship with time. It's island time. So that was an interesting encounter. So it can happen. Irritation can still arise if you don't catch it. So you have to be alert so that you catch it before it takes you over. And then realize you don't want it. What for? And it's gone. Related to that is unhappiness. A lot of so-called unhappiness is also a childish way of trying to change things by being as unhappy as you can about them. And the underlying unconscious or semi-conscious assumption is, if I'm really unhappy, somebody, perhaps God, is going to do something about it, or I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm going to show him how dreadful it is, and then finally, this is an unconscious assumption behind the unhappiness, because you believe, if you're habitually and frequently unhappy, you believe that it has a purpose. It's an underlying assumption. Perhaps you wouldn't verbalize it in that way, but you believe that it works for you. Of course it doesn't, but things are going to change, but just need to be really unhappy, so that God finally, even if you don't believe in God, this can still be the mechanism, the underlying unconscious assumption behind it. It's something's going to happen. And of course the opposite is true, because the more unhappy you are with something, the more you are stuck in the situation. All life sees, you're using, whenever you're waiting, you become present. When you're in nature, you're present. You invite presence into your life. In the middle of the night, when worry starts, you suddenly realize this is not only futile, it's also destructive, and you surrender that kind of thinking and put your attention on your breathing instead, or into your body. Those are things you voluntarily invite presence into your life. And then presence power, so to speak, presence power grows in you. Then when a bigger situation happens, there's so much more presence to deal with it. I've spent years of my life just dwelling in presence. You don't have to do that. I mean, you can be active at the same time. There were years of my life where there was very little doing, and I was just sometimes spending hours on my bicycle or walking in a park, just being. And sometimes I had this strange feeling that there's a reason why I have to do that. It's not doing it, just call it. So it's like going very deep in order to go out and make a difference in this world. I had to go very deep within first, very deep, and then the going out became possible. How much difference you make in this world is always relative to how deep you go within yourself, how much presence you access within yourself, how connected you are with the essence of who you are, the essence of life. That determines how much difference you really make in this life. And so you're all going to make and are already making an enormous difference, and the universe loves consciousness. The universe is consciousness, and consciousness wants to emerge more fully on this planet and on many other planets, I'm sure, because that is what underlies the evolution of the whole universe. So by having the awakening of consciousness and your presence practice as your main life goal, no matter what you do on the surface of your life, your job, your relationships, your main goal is in your relationships, in your work situation, in your home situation, your main goal is being present wherever you are and whatever you do. Then your life becomes empowered, and you will do a lot of good without necessarily feeling that I am doing it. It flows through you. And those of you who are still looking for something to do, the question often people ask me, what am I meant to do? Where am I meant to be? Who am I meant to be with? And of course the first answer is the foundation for it all, to find out where you are meant to be, what you are meant to do, who you are meant to be with. The first answer is you're meant to be here, you're meant to be doing what you're doing right now, and you're meant to be with whoever you are with right now at this moment. That's foundation. I'm not talking about for the rest of your life, but right now, so you come to a full acceptance of whatever is in the present moment. Now, most people who are trying to figure out what they're supposed to do in their lives, they don't give their fullest attention, and they're not fully aligned with the present moment, where they are, who they are with. They are rejecting it in some way, and that obstructs the power and obstructs the arising of presence. So you become accepting and comfortable with where you are right now. So you're meant to be here right now. That's why you're here. I'm meant to be here. So that can become a foundation for realizing what you should do once you accept the isness of present moment. What the doing then arises out of that state of alignment with life, with this alignment with the present moment. Then you might get insights into what it is you want to do, or rather what the universe or the one consciousness wants to use you for. So you no longer look at what do I want from life, but what does life want from me? how can I be of service to the one consciousness, you could say. And if then it begins to flow through you, and it might start flowing through you in exactly the same doing that you've already been doing, but now you're doing it fully presently. Let's say you're an aspiring actress, but in the meantime you're working at a fast food restaurant. So can you be fully accepting of where you are right now without losing your goal, but giving your fullest loving attention to whatever you're doing right now? Even if it seems repetitive, you give it your loving attention. And it is often the case when you are completely aligned and completely accept what is, things begin to change. When you are in non-acceptance internally, you are stuck. Can also happen that once you accept the present moment completely, you realize, I cannot be here any longer, and you just walk out. That can happen too. But it would not be a confrontational thing. It's a peaceful realization what it is that you need to do. So honor whatever it is you're doing at this moment. I sometimes admire in some restaurants you have waiters or waitresses who are wonderfully present. They give you, it doesn't necessarily mean the most expensive restaurant. In fact, the most expensive often they're just snobbish and they don't. But in some, even in simple restaurants, some are just when they put a glass down, they're present. It's done with care and attention. And when they ask what do you want, they're present. Anywhere you can practice presence, and you can affect people no matter where you are, because you will come into contact with some people, and presence is contagious, as Tammy just told us, in a good way. Presence is contagious. Whoever you come into contact with will be affected by your presence, and then you will attract, almost miraculously, the right people or the right situations into your life that then will bring about a change. So by being present, you are connected to the totality, and you attract people and situations into your life that are helpful. And then once you realize, oh, this is what I want to do, the doing, the insight comes. Or it could be just a continuation of what you're doing already, but now you're doing it in an empowered way. Might be totally different too. Once you realize and you take more action, empowered by presence, then you find many helpful factors suddenly appearing. The moment you're aligned with the arising consciousness, and your main goal is presence, sustaining presence, no matter where you are and what you're doing, then your actions become empowered by that one consciousness. But the consciousness is not form. And what we perceive as space, can we even say that space exists? Well, not really. It makes existence possible, but it doesn't exist as such, because space is not anything. It's a total mystery. We can look into outer space at night clear sky, and then you look and there's the vastness of space, and what is awe-inspiring when you look out at night and the sky is clear. Yes, it's incredible to see the thousands of stars that you can see with your naked eye, the faint luminous band of our own galaxy, the Milky Way, which goes along there, exists in total, absolute stillness. Those were my first meditations when I was 15, looking up. I didn't know it was a meditation because it stopped my mind briefly. The most awe-inspiring thing is not so much the infinite, almost infinite number of celestial bodies. I mean, most of this, what we call stars, are suns, with the exception of the few planets that are part of our solar system. Most of these so-called stars are suns, and the luminous band of the Milky Way is millions of suns, creating just the luminosity. You can't distinguish individual suns. But that's not the most awe-inspiring thing about when looking up into. The most awe-inspiring thing is the vastness and the absolute stillness of it, and the vastness of space. Oh. You can't even start thinking about it. It's totally impossible to grasp. And yet, what is that? Nobody knows actually what it is. Space. It doesn't exist, because exist means it manifests, it stands out. As I mentioned before, X means out, exist, to stand out. Space enables things to exist. The important thing is the inner space is just as vast as the outer space, but it does not have an extension in this dimension. And that is the inner space of consciousness. And perhaps the outer space is an externalization of what we call consciousness. It enables everything to be, is not subject to time. So when you sit in a room, let's go back to the room, you become aware of the content of the room, and then you become aware of the space of the room. That's the essence. If you were asking the room, let's imagine for a moment the room is a living entity, if you ask the room, can you describe yourself? Can you find out about what you are? Then, well, I am the furniture, the content makes up the room, and the ceiling, and whatever the room contains. The room would describe itself through the content and through the boundaries: ceiling, floor, walls, chairs, tables, lamps. And is that all? You can ask the room, and then the room would say, yeah, I think so. I've looked at everything, and that's who I am. That's what I am. And then you say, well, you might have overlooked something, and that's the space, which is the essence of the room. Otherwise, there would be nothing, wouldn't be a room. So if the room became aware of its own essence as space, that would be an awakening. Now, the analogy, of course, the room is you, And if I asked you to describe yourself, you would normally begin by describing yourself in terms of the content of your mind, or the content of your mind, memories, concepts, thoughts, emotions, your past, all the stuff that makes up your personality. That's all the content of your mind. And that's how people usually perceive themselves. They perceive themselves as the content. They are the content of their mind. And they are unaware of the essence of who they are, which is not content, which is beyond content. That's the space of consciousness. And so this is like the room. And then you ask, haven't you overlooked something? You talked about yourself in terms of content. Who are you? And then you have to think, okay, I forgot something. The presence that makes it all possible. And that's an immediate realization. You can't understand it. You can only be it. And you are it. You cannot realize it except when there's a gap in the stream of thinking, even if it's short, like now. Thinking subsides for a moment, and it doesn't subside because you're falling asleep. That could happen too. But thinking subsides and alertness remains. And then the miracle happens inside you, which is the next step in the evolution of human consciousness, and that's connected to planetary consciousness. The next step is the transcendence of thinking. Transcendence means that you don't think anymore. It means you realize something that's beyond thinking. It includes thinking, but it's beyond it. That's inseparable from who you are. It's vaster, much vaster than thinking. And then thinking still continues to fulfill an important function, but a different function from before. It's no longer self-serving. Self-serving thinking is egoic thinking. It's no longer compulsive, and it's no longer addictive. It no longer gives you the foundation for your sense of who you are. It's simply a wonderful tool for creating, a wonderful, extremely powerful tool for manifesting and creating and giving form to things, participating consciously in the act of creation that the universe is engaged in. So it's a wonderful thing, but unless you have transcended thinking, you are at the mercy of thinking. And in fact, even to say, I think would be a lie if you haven't transcended thinking, because if you say, I think, it implies that there's some kind of volition, but there isn't, because if you're completely unconscious, if there's zero awareness in you, thinking happens to you. You don't do it, it's being done to you. Thoughts appear in your mind and you can't help it. The types of thoughts that appear in your mind depend on the way your mind has been conditioned. So depending what part of the planet you come from or what kind of background you had when you were growing up, that determines the type of your conditioning. Doesn't matter what the type of your conditioning is, the fundamental fact remains. Your thinking, in the absence of awareness, is totally conditioned, and it is an involuntary process. And there are still millions of humans on the planet, billions probably, who are at the mercy of their thought processes, which are totally determined by the conditioning of their mind, their personal and cultural, etc., a background where they grew up, and so they think, they do things, they think things, and they think it's them. It's the thought processes inside them being at work. So they're not thinking, they are being thought by thought. Thought thinks you up as an entity, a kind of mind-made entity. That's an extremely important part of awakening. In fact, you need that to provide fuel for the arising of presence.
Our listener writes, how can we stay present and in touch with consciousness on days when we feel depressed and lack motivation?
Right. Sometimes that is in quite a few people associated with periods of low physical energy, because energy fluctuates, and so from occasionally you may experience low levels of physical energy, and this can affect the mind too. The important thing is, first of all, when you talk about being depressed and so on, to see whether there is, what kind of thoughts are being created in your mind during that time. Ask yourself whether, or examine whether the certain types of thinking create that feeling of depression. Thoughts like, oh, it's all pointless anyway, or what's the point of it all? I hate this world. There's no point in even struggling anymore. I'm fed up, completely fed up with life. I can't take anymore. That type of thinking. Are you aware? What is the relationship between the emotion that you feel and your thought processes? Are perhaps your thoughts creating that emotion? Or could it be that the emotion is creating the thoughts? So when you are depressed, there will be certain thoughts going through your mind, and probably they will not be pleasant thoughts. So be aware of the relationship between what you're feeling, this depressed feeling of sadness, depression, you feel dejected, and your thought processes. And if in the moment of thinking, those types of thought that accompany the feeling of depression or pointlessness, if you can be there and observe those thoughts, then again, as in the first question, answer to the first question, when you recognize those thoughts, you no longer completely believe in them. You recognize them as a conditioned movement in your mind. And then you may be able to come to an acceptance of whatever it is you're feeling at this moment, without adding the baggage of thought to it. So what remains then is this feeling of perhaps low energy, or it could be an activation of your pain body to some extent. You feel emotion in you that doesn't feel good, but you're then no longer fueling it with your thinking. So if there's enough awareness in you while you're going through a period of depression, allow yourself to feel what it is you're feeling, But be careful that you don't fuel it with your thinking. And if you feel what you feel, that's all you have to do is surrender to your experience of this moment. You accept your experience of this moment, which at this moment may be not pleasant, but that's what is inside you. So probably the greatest spiritual practice is to accept whatever it is that you're experiencing at this moment. So if you're experiencing depression, then that's the isness of the present moment. And as much as possible, you step out of your mind and just be the awareness. Observe, it may be the case that there is an addiction in you that periodically arises, and that's the addiction to unhappiness, the addiction to negativity. And that is usually connected with the pain body that needs to renew itself periodically. Most of you will know what I'm talking about. You've read about the pain body, old emotion that still lives in you. Sometimes it's dormant, sometimes it needs to feed, to take in more so that it can stay alive. It's a semi-autonomous energy field in you. And so in the absence of its favorite way to feed is on other people's reactions. So it will create drama, it will push your partners or other family members, people's buttons, so to speak, so that you get a negative emotional reaction. And so that it loves the drama of the emotional drama and will provoke drama, and that's how the pain body loves to feed. But if that's for some reason is not possible for whatever reason, the pain body is quite happy also to feed on your thoughts. So it will periodically rise up into your mind, and then you will think thoughts that feed the pain body. But the thoughts themselves are already created by the pain body, and then it's a vicious circle. The negative thoughts that you don't want at that moment, you do not want to let go of that type of thinking because there's not enough awareness in you at that moment. At that moment, when I say you don't want to let go, or when I say you are addicted to your unhappiness, when I say you, it's not really you. It's the mind pattern with which you are at that moment completely identified, and that's why I call it you. So in that moment, it is you. So there are many, many people who are addicted to their unhappy states, the unhappiness in them. And if some people have it almost continuously, but most people have periods when this happens and then it subsides, and that's the typical way in which the pain body arises from its dormant state, feeds on several hours or even days of deep negative thinking, and then subsides, and then for a while you're free again. So addiction to unhappiness, this is one way of speaking about it. Be careful, see whether you can detect in yourself when in the moment of it happening, you're almost you're indulging in this feeling of, could be self-pity or condemnation of life or others or whatever it is. You love it. You love that you love that those feelings and those thoughts, and you don't want to get out. If somebody at that moment said to you to come out of it, you say, "Oh, shut up! I don't want to hear." Now, some people have that so strongly that the addiction to unhappiness has become part of their conditioned personality. So they are part of their identity is a very unhappy sense of self. And if that is a terrible place to be in, but again, the only way that you can transcend that and escape from that prison is to be aware when it happens. So a good question, therefore, is, am I enjoying my unhappiness in some weird way? Do I love my unhappiness? And if I love my unhappiness, who is that I that loves unhappiness? It must be a weird and crazy I that loves unhappiness. So maybe that's not really me. Maybe it's just an unhappy self in me that loves. I know that I had that very strongly for many years in my 20s. So you have to be really alert and see whether you enjoy your unhappiness. And once you notice it, you say, oh, wow, I'm really enjoying this. In the moment of noticing it, you've made it conscious. And then it's very likely that you cannot go on very much longer enjoying it, because this can only continue when you're unconscious. It needs your unconsciousness. This false self, it's an aspect of the false self that is the ego. It needs your unconsciousness to continue to survive. But when you make it conscious, then there comes a moment of surprise and says, oh, wow, I'm actually enjoying this. I don't want to I love these negative thoughts, love in a perverse way almost. This is the egoic kind of love. And then you might even ask, is that who I am? Who am I? Why do I love this? This awareness is coming, awareness is arising. And then suddenly you step out of identification with that mind pattern, mental, emotional. And that is part of the awakening. So those things for many people are a very important part of their spiritual awakening. A very important part of spiritual awakening is to become aware of the unconsciousness in you, the various ways in which the unconsciousness manifests in you. That's an extremely important part of awakening. In fact, you need that to provide fuel for the arising of presence. The dysfunctional states, the dysfunctional mental emotional states, the negative mental emotional states, the mental emotional states that create so much suffering, ultimately they provide not only motivation for awakening, they also provide the fuel for awakening. So be grateful when you detect those things in yourself. It's not a bad thing, it's a wonderful thing to detect the unconsciousness in you, to become aware of the unconsciousness in you and realize that it is not you ultimately. For years it had been it pretended to be you, and you were so identified with it, yet you thought it was you, and suddenly or gradually another deep I, it's the deep I that is now awakens. And the deep I, which is presence, recognizes that the surface I is a conditioned entity, and it's not who I am. It is there, and that's a disidentification, and that's all part of the awakening process. Your sense of self-worth is diminishing, and that's a source of great suffering. So the story, if we go back to the beginning, the story of you, let's travel back in time to a prehistoric mythological time where we encounter a young man going for a walk in the woods, and his name, according to ancient Greek mythology, is Narcissus. Narcissus, the young man walking in the woods, very happy, contemplating nature, not disturbed yet by incoming text messages or Facebook postings or Instagram or possible Tinder dates, not distracted by anything, just being there, present, enjoying the aliveness of the present moment. And then this young man came upon a pool of water, or a little pond, a very still pond. And of course, at those times, there were no mirrors yet. There was no technology. Mirrors had not been invented. He looked into the pond, and he saw his own reflection in the pond. And he was amazed at the beauty of his own reflection. Now you might think, is that perhaps a very ancient prophecy of the selfie? Can't take my eyes off it. No, it was not a prophecy of the selfie, but there's a connection, of course. There is a connection. This is the glass surface of the selfie, and here we have the reflection of the image of his own image in the water. Now, the story goes that he fell in love with his own reflection, and he could not get away from it. He got drawn back to it again and again. And although the story says that he fell in love with his own reflection, a more precise way of putting it would be to say that he became obsessed with his own reflection, because ultimately, I don't know if you have experienced it ever, falling in love is a kind of obsession. Not loving, love is something else. I'm talking about falling in love, of course, is a very obsessive thing. I need you. Don't you ever leave me. And then, of course, he or she leaves, or you leave. That's a long story. We all know it. And he lost his happiness. He was no longer happy. There are different versions of the story, but in the more ancient versions, eventually he commits suicide. So that story in mythology often expresses a deep truth which otherwise humans would not understand or could not express in any abstract way. The truth needs to be embedded in a story. And there's a very deep truth here that points to the arising of a mentally created self-image that people have and live with. So it's almost as if you had a phantom that walks with you wherever you go, that is your mind-created image or concept of who you are. And that is what we call the ego. The ego is a mental image conditioned by the past, conditioned by your environment and many other factors. A mental image, a conceptual sense of self that you identify with so completely that you disappear in it and live through it. You believe that that is who you are. And that is the conditioned, mind-made self. It consists of layers, different layers. At the most fundamental level, first of all, everybody identifies, first of all, with your physical body. That's the most fundamental level of identification. You believe that you are the body. You identify with the body that you are. And the body, of course, already is a problematic thing to identify with, because you compare this body that you say, I am this body, this physical form, and then you compare it to others, and it can be a source of pride if your body is better looking or stronger than most other bodies. The ego gets in there and feels inflated, greater. And it can also be a source of suffering or shame if your body is not the way you think it should be, or society tells you it should be, or when you compare it to others, it's not as strong or as beautiful as others, then you suffer. You have a sense of self that feels less than. On the other side, you might have a sense of self that feels more than. People who have a strong or beautiful body, when I was young, I would have given 20 years of my life if God or the universe had said to me, I can give you a beautiful, strong body and make you into a good-looking man that attracts countless women. I would have said, it's a deal. 20 years of my life, I'll be happy, but it didn't happen. But I can see how people who are good-looking or strong or both, how easy it is for them to seek a large part of their identity in their external appearance. And that can be fine for a while, but inevitably, of course, what is a source of pleasure for some years, gradually and perhaps even quickly turns into a source of suffering, because the body does not last. And a day comes when you look in the mirror and the mirror image is no longer the same as it was 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Especially if you have a photo of yourself next to the mirror, something went very wrong here. And then it becomes a source of suffering. Now, in our civilization, there are repair jobs that you can do that for a while will help you feel you're still okay, good looking, but inevitably you begin to suffer more and more, because who you think you are is diminishing. Who you think you are, the value, your sense of self-worth is diminishing. And that's a source of great suffering. And of course, humans who identified with a negative body image, they are suffering already when they are young. They don't have to wait until the body grows old. So we have identification with the body, and then you put clothes on the body, of course, that they become an extension of the body. And they can add something, they can hide things, they can conceal things that don't look so good, or they can enhance things that look good. And then it's nice, so people are looking at me. It feels good to the ego. If dreadful things happened in your past, it is especially liberating to sense that. And it's often people who have had a very difficult life that come to this realization. They have had their crucifixion, and then there comes the transcendence of suffering. And again, please remember, I'm just using words. So it's not the ultimate truth cannot be expressed in words. It's only a distant approximation. That which you sense when thinking subsides, if only for a moment, and you can sense the beingness that is always there underneath it, the timeless presence. You sense that. Is that, and then as you can sense that, and you become more rooted in it, even in your daily life, you begin to be able to sense that in the background through the simple fact that you're aware that you're aware. Even when you're doing things, you're aware that you're aware. When you're looking at something, there's not only what you're looking at, there's only the awareness that you're aware of. So that's there, the awareness of awareness. And that, what now, is that God? I would suggest not quite. It is, I'm speaking purely intuitively, but some mystics and others have had similar realizations. It's the emanation of God. In other words, the consciousness that inhabits you and temporarily disguises itself as a person is an emanation of the source of all life. And that source, which cannot be named, which does not exist, because exist means to have a location in space and time. Everything exists is somewhere. So in that sense, God does not exist, because God does not have God is beyond this dimension where existence unfolds. But like the sun emanating light, God, or the source of all life, which cannot be named or understood at all, emanates consciousness into this dimension. And gradually this dimension evolves. Gradually it expresses more of that light that emanates from the transcendent source of all life. Gradually, because this universe, this was important discovery of Darwin, that there is an evolution of life. It becomes increasingly complex. What he didn't realize is there's an intelligence that expresses itself through that. So there's a source of all life beyond the transcendent source, which is God. And God shines like the sun shines, and the light of the sun, you can feel it on your skin. Now, whether you say this is the sun, in some sense, the light of the sun is the sun, because there's no separation. But in another sense, the sun is not different, but infinitely vaster than the light that you feel on your skin. In the same way that the emanation of God, which is consciousness, yes, It's God in the sense of it is an emanation of God. And so this is what you are. You're an emanation from source emanation. And the consciousness in you is the light. As Jesus said to his disciples, but he meant really every human being, because his disciples were not that special. You are the light of the world, he said. And he said it of himself in another gospel. He said, I am the light of the world. He said both things. He told others, you are the light of the world, and he said, I am the light of the world. What could that possibly be except that, because the people he was talking to were not special, particularly important VIPs in this world, but you are the light of the world. The light in you is the consciousness in you, and without the consciousness, you are the consciousness of the world. You are the light of the world. Without the consciousness, the world would not even be. And that is when you realize that your essential identity is being consciousness, which is an emanation of source, whatever you want to call that. And your essential identity is that, the being. And then that is where you derive your sense of identity from, who you are. It's no longer the memory of your past. It becomes relatively insignificant. Yes, you remember it, but the wonderful thing about your past, it has brought you to this point of awakening. No matter how senseless it seemed at the time, because every life is kind of messy in one way or another, and many things seem, why did this happen to me? Why did I do that? That was so stupid. Or why did this have to happen to me? My childhood could have been happy. It was so unhappy. Why did this? But all your past it brings you to this point of awakening. So it fulfilled its function, but it no longer gives you an identity. You recognize it, you acknowledge it, you know it, but you no longer derive your sense of who you are from your past. That comes from a deeper place. You can sense the presence that you are, the being that you are, not conditioned by your past whatsoever. And this is especially liberating if you have a very heavy past. If dreadful things happened in your past, it is especially liberating to sense that. And it's often people who have had a very difficult life that come to this realization. They have had their crucifixion, and then there comes the transcendence of suffering. As it's pointed out, even for non-Christians, even if you're not a Christian, you don't have to be a Christian to understand the deeper significance of the cross, which is no different from the Buddha's teachings. Buddha said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. And in the Christian cross, it's there as an image. The teaching is the suffering is the cross, is the instrument of suffering. Jesus is nailed to the cross. This the deepest image of suffering. But the cross is also the symbol for transcendence of suffering. The cross is also a symbol for the divine. It's both. It's a torture instrument and it's a symbol for the divine. That's amazing. The two together. This can be a teaching can be transmitted in this way, even to people who would never understand it conceptually, as I'm talking about it conceptually. There's a deep truth embedded in that archetypal image. Jesus is the archetypal human, and the cross, and it is the archetypal journey of every human being. So be thankful for all the suffering that has brought you to this point. It's brought you here. That's amazing. Awakening. Does it mean that from now on life will not be challenging anymore? No. The challenges continue. But they may be of a somewhat different kind, no longer produced by the dysfunction of the egoic mind, as is often the case with many humans. But still, challenges come in many forms. The difference is, as you become increasingly rooted in the being of yourself, the transcendent self, not the being, the challenges are no longer converted into suffering. So there's no longer a personality that complains about what's happening to me. The challenges are simply accepted for what they are. Action is taken if action is necessary or possible. No action is taken, a simple surrender happens when a challenge comes and there isn't really anything you can do. Then that's what is. And then once you reach this point, every challenge can deepen, if it's a real challenge, it deepens your state of consciousness. It makes you more present. And that is a wonderful thing when you've reached that point. I have noticed with the so-called pandemic the last couple of years, some people have become become less conscious than they were before the pandemic, some. This is the same with also the challenge that happens to you individually. Anything going wrong in your life, a breakup, loss of a job, loss of home, a death from someone close to you, a court case or whatever threat. Some people become more unconscious when they're being challenged by life, more reactive, more deeply entrenched in their conditioning, in the ego. Every divorce lawyer meets people at their most unconscious, usually, unless they're already evolving, in which case it's fine. And even realtors and people like that find people that are so wired, people they get so attached to the outcome and result, it really pulls them down. A challenge can make you unconscious or more conscious, depending where you are at. And some people, through the pandemic, have become more present. They have accepted, they have had perhaps been affected in different ways, financially, or jobs, or life situation, or relationships have been affected by it, all kinds of things have happened. And some people have been able to use that and go more into being. Sometimes there wasn't that much doing anymore, you had to go more into being. And others have become more reactive and more angry and more fearful. Fear has been a big thing. More fearful of the fear of, ultimately, the fear of death, what could happen to me, the fearful, oh my God, that's ultimately, fear is always ultimately the fear of death, the greatest loss of myself, and that tends to go away when you are rooted in the being. It's hard to explain why it goes away and how it goes away, but it does. The fear of death seems to disappear. I'll just mention the challenges continue to come. I've had my entire life, I had virtually no health challenge until late last year. I'd never been in a hospital as an inpatient, or hardly ever see a doctor, and suddenly I was hit by just a few months ago, a huge challenge, what normally people would consider a huge life challenge to a medical condition. And immediately comes the possibility, okay, well, I may only be here for a few more months or not, who knows? And after the initial diagnosis, I just went, okay. I became even more empty than I normally am. I'm normally fairly empty, but I was just like that. And there wasn't no fear. I was basically dead already. There was but there was a presence left. the person didn't matter very much. And then I spent many hours in just complete presence, and then I was operated on, and then they looked at it again, and for the time being, the challenge seems to have dissolved completely. Will it come back? Who knows? So that's it. They continue to come, but just the greater the challenge, the greater the intensity of presence. I've often found that in other situations in my life too, when the challenges come, you go more. Shh. So there's no longer a person that reacts to what's happening. It's just the beingness, just the presence, just the consciousness.